Thank you, Moshe. So I'm sitting in my office, and Chaim Silverstone is going to interview me about my book that I'm in the process of writing. Chaim?
Thank you. All right, so my first question is, what is the title and purpose of your book, and why did you choose this title?
So the title of my book is Howard's Viewpoint. The purpose is to combine various different articles that I have written on a wide variety of topics. And the purpose of this book is to engage with a variety of different people with different viewpoints. So it could be journalists, people, subject matter experts at think tanks, can be politicians, general members of society, various subject matter experts, stakeholders, and just to generally generate public discussions, media panel discussions, think tank discussions, community town hall type discussions, etc.
Wow, sounds very interesting.
Just one second, we have to work out if you're going to be talking to Chaim or you're talking to the camera. I don't think you should switch back and forth.
Oh.
If this is going to be shown as an interview, you should be looking at Chaim all the time and forget about the camera. If you want to address the audience directly, then you look at the camera.
I say, look at me.
Okay. So okay. We'll go back to that. I don't want to repeat that one.
You do or don't?
that one, no. Now you're. I just want to leave it as it is.
Right. It's probably better no at an angle, no?
Huh?
The way he was sitting was probably better, no?
Yeah, in terms of angle it was, but if he's looking at you, awkward to turn his head like that. So we'll do it like this.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay, keep going. Okay, so what is COP? And what is the purpose of COP showing leadership by example?
COP is an abbreviation for the current United Nations Climate Change Conference. It's a summit that takes place annually, and the purpose is to address the issue of climate change. A major question that I have is the reality of the conference is that dozens, possibly 100 world leaders turn up to a conference. Most of them arriving in private jets, and you need a lot of security with you, and sometimes there might even private jets before that with advanced teams and so on. And I've done a bit of investigation, and the question is, do the leaders actually have to be at the conference themselves in order for the conference to meet their objectives? And based on my research, there's no actual requirement for the leaders to be there themselves. I've been told that the majority of the discussions take place with diplomats and civil servants who, a lot of the diplomats can potentially be stationed in the host country anyway, and the civil servants can often fly on existing commercial flights with a single seat without having a whole big entourage. In my view, that would be a much more efficient way of running the conference. And the COVID pandemic has shown that there's the technology of virtual summits. So a world leader could have a pre-recorded message or even have a live interaction with the summit from their office in whatever country they're based in, without physically having to be there themselves. So in my view, that'll be major environmental savings and major economical savings, and an ambassador that's located in the country anyway could, technically speaking, represent a president or a prime minister as an official representative.
Oh, very interesting.
Oops, what, it fell off?
Yeah.
That's maybe
Yeah.
too high.
I'm not going to repeat the question because of that. Just leave it rolling.
Okay. Okay. So my next question is, what does Elvis diplomacy mean, and what is its purpose?
Elvis diplomacy is actually a term that I coined myself.
Oh.
So, with a lot of research about diplomacy and soft power, so there's something called cultural diplomacy. So often it can be sporting events, but it's also like cultural things, which includes music. And so a lot of countries have composers and musicians and so on. So there's one specific case that comes to mind. In 2006, George W. Bush was the United States president, and the incumbent Japanese prime minister at the time, I can't pronounce his name, but the bottom line is President Bush recognized that his Japanese counterpart was a die-hard Elvis fan. I'm not sure that Bush himself was such an Elvis fan, but if you want to do your best for enhancing relations, you have to take into account what the other person wants to do. And he did something totally outside of the presidential handbook, which was actually not a common thing for Bush. He was more conservative in how he ran his presidency. And it's, to the best of my knowledge, it's the only time an incumbent United States president has taken an incumbent visiting world leader to someone else's private residence in the United States. So he took the Japanese Prime Minister on Air Force One to Memphis, Tennessee to visit Graceland. And there were special arrangements that Elvis's late daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, and her mother, Priscilla Presley, were the private tour guides for the Japanese Prime Minister. And he had a total ball, put on sunglasses, and he was like singing Love Me Tender and Can't Help Falling in Love. And clearly, on a personal level, President Bush had made, in my view, major diplomatic mileage from what I'm going to describe as engaging in Elvis diplomacy. And on the other side, President Bush was a champion of democracy and the right to protest and so on. There were actually protesters protesting the issues of the day, and specifically the protesters with the Japanese Prime Minister was the Japanese, there's issues with whaling. So the protesters were dressed up as Elvis. There were 4 protesters singing Don't Be Cruel, dressed up as Elvis. And in my view, as on the other side of the democratic equation, the protesters did a very good job of getting the Japanese Prime Minister's attention. I suspect at that moment, security probably would have separated them, but if the Japanese Prime Minister was reflecting on the visit, for sure protesters dressed up as Elvis singing "Don't Be Cruel" would have at least got his attention.
Wow. So do you think
Just 1 second before the next question, I just want to know this a bit.
I want to ask, do you think that Elvis diplomacy is something that should be implemented on a regular basis within the presidency?
Very good question, Haim. It's one of these things. It needs to be customized for the right situation. Like, before a world leader visits, so one of the jobs of White House staffers is to do investigations and find out what the visiting world leader likes and is interested in. So in the situations where world leaders, the research shows an interest in Elvis, I think it's an excellent idea. In instances where there's no evidence of an interest in Elvis, then give it a pass. People are different, and you gotta choose what's likely to be productive on each individual case.
Very good. Okay, so the next question is, what is ANZAC? And what is your objective, and what ideas do you have in terms of making ANZAC more relevant?
So ANZAC stands for Australian New Zealand Armed Corps. There's an annual holiday in Australia and New Zealand called Anzac Day to commemorate the landing of Australian and New Zealand military troops on the Gallipoli Peninsula in present-day Turkey in 1915. And when I was growing up, it was a lot more relevant because when I was in school, there was still some living World War I veterans and a lot of World War II veterans, and like every second person in school had a grandfather who fought in World War II. I'm actually included in that, although my grandfather fought in the British Army. So there was a lot more natural identification. Growing up in the Australian capital, Canberra, it's where the Australian War Memorial is located. I saw a number of Anzac Day marches, and also being in Canberra, there's a lot of public servants, civil servants that work in defence, and the Australian Defence Force Academy is located there. So I knew a lot of people who served in the army. So I had a lot of general identification, but I noticed as there's not so many World War II veterans, and there's still a number of Vietnam veterans, but unfortunately they're not quite viewed as heroes in the same way, the way history turned out. So there's a lot less appreciation for the Australian military. And the bottom line is, in order for it to have the relevance that it needs, there needs to be a lot of innovation to make it relevant. So I have a general idea. I was actually successful. I wrote an email to the Australian War Memorial suggesting the idea of finding celebrities that have served in the military and maybe having an exhibition or like films where celebrities are like interviewed about their experience, and a lot of people who otherwise would have very little identification with the military, might even have an anti-military mindset, would have a lot more positive identification as a result.
Interesting idea. Interesting.
Yeah.
And how was it responded to?
I'm happy that I got a reply from the director of the Australian War Memorial. He acknowledged my idea, and he forwarded the idea to the department within the War Memorial that deals with exhibitions, and from my standpoint, that's about as much as I can do. To be honest, I have limited. I'm not so familiar with what celebrities are relevant, but the main thing is that the abstract idea has been passed on, and I'm happy if they re-engineer the idea as much as they want, or incorporate the idea into a different existing exhibition. The main thing is that something extra that's relevant is done as a result of my suggestion to advance their cause.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, so the next question is, I understand that you were an online ambassador for an online alumni group from your high school year. Can you describe the experience and what you learned from the experience?
So for starters, the experience is, technically speaking, taking a position of official year ambassador is administration of their Facebook page. But it's also unusual for someone who's not located in Canberra to even take the position. But because it was during COVID, everything's online anyway. So I just thought, okay, I will show a little bit of gratitude. And there's a number of things that I achieved. Like, for example, finding people who are very disconnected. A notable example is living in the capital city. I was at school with some children of diplomats. So someone who was the son of a diplomat, an American diplomat, I happened to type in his name online, and I got in touch with him and connected him with the group.
Great.
There's been a number of online discussions that I've generated. For example, there was a camp in Year 9, so I basically put an initial post to generate the discussion, and the key thing is not to be in charge of the post, but to get it started and let the process have a life of its own with the engagement of other members, alumni from my year. That's the key thing. And this particular thing, some people shared some posters, some photographs of Year 9 camp. Another thing is a teacher of mine who, so at my high school he was an English teacher. He was my Year 10 form advisor. He also happens to be a poet. I was aware he wrote poetry, but I actually found his Wikipedia entry Australian poet, but he was nominated for an award for a poetry book that he wrote. So I posted that and for people to see. And I joked with my parents and my parents-in-law. He's an Australian poet. His day job was being my Year 10 form advisor. but I'm happy he's continued with poetry in retirement. There was a teacher that passed away who was a science teacher, so I put a post, and there were about half a dozen different members or alumni from my year who shared their various different experiences, and it was a pretty interesting discussion. And one of my great achievements was actually having a Zoom interview during COVID with an alumni who was who is an Australian diplomat. At the time, she was serving as Australian Deputy High Commissioner to Papua New Guinea. At the moment, she's the head of the East European and Latin American desk at DFAT. I understand diplomats can't really share a lot, but anyone who, with the whole Russian-Ukraine war, I know Australian diplomats and a lot of other diplomats are doing a lot of quiet things behind the scenes that no one knows about. So whatever it is, I'm very grateful for it.
Wow, yeah, sounds very special.
Yep.
Okay, so...
One second, I just want to see if I can get a camera angle.
Yep. The bottom thing is, you can take that to a lot of different areas in life. There's lots of things that happen behind the scenes that aren't really known about. So you just have to somehow have coruscant. I'm going to take it off. So I'm going to just make a point before you ask the question. One thing that I found from my 10-year high school reunion, I actually turned up. I had a kippah on. I had tzitzit. It wasn't kosher. I didn't eat anything. Motzei Shabbat. I actually wasn't married at the time. I was single. The bottom line is, don't pretend to be anything other than what you are. And don't worry about looking good. Just be yourself.
Genuine.
And someone, a friend of mine who was also single, was asking, maybe I'll find a girl specifically to go to this. And I didn't outright tell him what to do, but I very much expressed the best thing is to go to just go as yourself as you are, and at the end of the day, how much do other people really care about these little things that might seem like such a big issue to you?
Very good. Very good. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Are you ready for the next one?
One second, I just want to move this back.
Yeah. That was recorded, right?
Yeah.
Very good.
One second. Yeah. Okay. I think you can continue.
All right. Next question. Can you describe your experience recognizing your skills and some of the ways you have used your skills over the years.
Very good question, Hein. So, in terms of describing this experience, recognizing my skills, pretty much 2 words: life experience, and the rest is details. Like, details could be being at someone's Shabbos table and there's like 12 children, and I remember all the names. Having instances where you need to navigate and use a map. And I'm not talking about the modern GPS, I'm talking about the old-fashioned, like you open up a map book, you look at it, and you work it out.
Were you ever able to put them back together? I could never do that.
Put back together.
Maps, you know, you pull them out and then you try and fold them back into place and you can never get it right.
Very good question. I have limited experience using that type of maps. Whenever possible, I chose to use book maps where you do have a certain difference. You also need to be able to like navigate and see, like this finishes at 43 and goes to 45, like navigate what page to turn to when you get off one page to the other. So, very good question, but I chose the books, but I was able to navigate getting from page to page.
Very good, very good. All right. You have a QBE. You know what that is? A degree in QBE. Qualified by experience.
Thank you very much. I actually haven't heard that before, but that's a... well done. Well done. I want to congratulate you for making it up. And when we finish this interview, I actually want to write that down, and I'm willing to give you credit for it.
Great, great. I'll take credit where I can. Okay, next question.
Just one second, I just want to put this under the shirt.
Okay. Can you describe your experience recognizing your weaknesses and some of the ways you have addressed your weaknesses over the years?
Okay, so experience recognizing my weaknesses, like my strengths, also 2 words, life experience. So once I recognize a weakness and I'm willing to accept my weakness, the question is finding a way to cover for the weakness. Like, for example, like if it's difficult to paint the house, you get painters in. If it's difficult to clean the house, you get a cleaner in. If you're being a parent and it's a bit too much, so you might get someone to help you, separate from a babysitter, like when you're actually with the children to help you and aid you. There's lots of different examples. I'm going to be here all day if I'm going to go through it, but the main thing is once you've recognized the weakness, sometimes you can actually think of a solution yourself. If you're going to consult the right people, then it's very likely you can either find the actual solution or a way to best manage the reality of having a weakness.
Sure. Oh, very good. It's very insightful. Okay. So the next question. Most diplomatic missions have a team of career diplomats. In theory, anyone can hold the post of ambassador supported by a team of career diplomats as long as protocol is followed. What does it even matter who holds the post of ambassador, and can you describe a notable example where the ambassador identity has made a difference to the bilateral relationship?
Okay, so first I want to give credit to Korean diplomats, because any major personality who's appointed as a non-Korea diplomat actually would not be able to function without a team of Korea diplomats to support him or her. But in terms of having, there is a bit of symbolism. Sometimes a political appointed diplomat, there's a symbolism, and also sometimes there's specific bits of experience. A clear example is growing up in Australia, the Australia-United States relationship. In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson needed to appoint an American ambassador to Australia. He asked the incumbent Prime Minister Robert Menzies at the time, what's the most important thing? Prime Minister Menzies said, someone with the ability to pick up the phone and call you. So ever since then, the majority of American ambassadors to Australia has been someone close to the president and close to the administration. There's a lot of advantages in that, in being enough on the inside to understand the workings of the administration. I know there's a lot of claims of nepotism, but the reality is it seems to work well for the relationship. And on the other side, Australian ambassadors to the United States, there was a distinguished former foreign minister in the 1990s, Andrew Peacock, and there was a distinguished former defense minister, Kim Beazley, 2010 to 2016. They were from opposite sides of politics. Both cases, they had a lot of expertise and the government experience to bring. At the current point, in my view, it's the biggest, certainly in terms of symbolism of the importance of the relationship. The current United States ambassador the current United States ambassador to Australia, stationed at the United States Embassy in Canberra, is Caroline Kennedy, who's the daughter of the iconic United States President from the 1960s, John F. Kennedy. She does have some diplomatic experience, having previously been ambassador to Japan, and she does have a lot of network experience as far as the Biden administration and members of Congress. In my view, one of the reasons why she has that very important network is, in general, it doesn't make much difference what family you're from. But in her case, because she's the daughter of an iconic United States president, to the best of my knowledge, like every second member of Congress makes it their business to know her over the years. So as a result, if there's such a thing of having a skill set by who your parents are, that would be the example. And another symbolic thing is in the last year it was the 60th anniversary of John F. Kennedy's "We Choose to Go to the Moon" speech at Rice University, Texas, which I see as something inspirational, as like in terms of setting goals. He didn't actually live to see man on the moon, but I see that as an important thing. And a key thing of man landing in the moon is Australia, in Canberra, there were a space tracking station with satellites that was key for communication for the moon mission to be successful. So I also see a bit of symbolism that that the daughter of John F. Kennedy happened to be the United States ambassador when it was the 60th anniversary of the moon speech. On the other side, the current Australian ambassador to the United States his name's Kevin Rudd. He happens to be a former Australian Prime Minister. It's the first time there's ever been a former Australian Prime Minister as ambassador. So in my view, it's very much a two-way, like how much more symbolism can you have in terms of who the ambassador is with the importance of the relationship. In terms of his skill set, for the last 9 years, he was the head of a think tank, Asia Policy Institute, and there's a lot of issues with China at the moment, with both Australia and the United States. So that's a key skill set to the role. Having been Australian Prime Minister, he understands like dealing with an American administration and so on. He also served as Australian Foreign Minister, and in the first part of his career, he did spend 7 years as an Australian diplomat. One of the postings as a junior diplomat was to China, so that also adds to his expertise. And he also happens to speak some Mandarin from his experience as a diplomat. So there's clearly a lot that he brings to the table.
Sure.
On a personal level, I actually once met him, but it's very, very not what you'd expect. I happened to be at the Yom Ha'atzmaut that the Israeli embassy hosted in Canberra in 2002. I was talking to the Israeli ambassador together with my mum, and the Israeli ambassador introduces my mum and I to some politician that I'd never heard of, didn't recognize, who'd just be appointed shadow foreign minister. To tell you the truth, I was like, who is this guy? Why is he so significant that the Israeli ambassador is making such a point of making sure to like introduce people? So little did I know he was the next Australian Prime Minister 5 years later. But so you never know who someone is.
Right.
However much it might seem like just some other Tom, Dick or Harry.
Right, sure. It's a very important lesson.
Yep.
Okay, so the next question. What's the big deal with the lighting in the Sydney Opera House for special events, and why is it a major issue when many cities around the world light up their iconic landmarks at a time, all the time?
Okay, so the specific issue is, I understand that taxpayers pay for it being lit up. And the New South Wales Premier, New South Wales is the state that Sydney is located. The Premier has a lot of say in like what it gets lit up for and what it doesn't get lit up for. There was an issue with the coronation of King Charles. Australia is a Commonwealth country that the New South Wales Premier decided not to line it up, and there was a lot of questions about it. And there's something called the Australian Monarchist League, who are pro-monarchy. In Australia, you have pro-monarchy and pro-republic, and they were disappointed. But okay, I acknowledge they're disappointed. There's an argument about taxpayers' money. The head of the Monarchist League actually said they would be prepared to pay for it themselves. And in my view, if groups of people are prepared to pay for the lighting themselves, I don't see the issue. And in terms of the taxpayers' fund, it's a very good, legitimate issue. In my view, it should be an issue for overlighting. And in my view, a good solution would be any organisation could register lighting and when they want to light, and there can be like a crowdfunding. People who believe in the cause and consider it important can contribute to it. And in terms of generally being a citizen and part of society, I think it would people who contribute a small sum as part of crowdfunding, if they identify with the specific issue that it's being lit up for, will feel more of a connection and more of an ownership. And the people in society who don't so much agree with the specific reason it's being lit up, well, if it's done by private funds and not by taxpayers' funds, it shouldn't be anywhere as much of an issue for them. For example, New Year's Eve, it could be that the Sydney CBD Chamber of Commerce could pay for it if they view that the lighting brings in so much business that it's good for business in the CBD. That would be good. So it could also be self-interest. There's various community and ethnic groups, so a lot of them get turned down. So if they can arrange to pay for it themselves, if it's important, then shouldn't be an issue for anyone else. The football grand final, a lot of people are interested. You could have like an opportunity to give $1 if it's $100,000. Like 100,000 people get the opportunity, first come, first served, and people can say, I have $1 ownership in in that. So just general citizenship and a solution that in my view is the best for everyone in a society where different people, different segments have very different priorities. That's the reality of society, and with that reality, how can you make society work best for everyone?
Very good. Wow. Thank you for that. So I wanted to ask you a question about Jerusalem Post Radio. Yeah. I understand that you worked for the Jerusalem Post Radio over a few years and plan to interview other team members about their experience. Can you describe your experience and what you intend to achieve by interviewing former team members?
So I had a very interesting experience at the Jerusalem Post. To tell you the truth, I never specifically saw myself working there until I saw a job that came up, sent my resume and happened to get it. But I got to work with a lot of journalists, and it was definitely a lot of growth, and I also learned a bit about being objective, and I learned that like a good journalist will ask tough questions to people on both sides of an argument, both sides of a political spectrum, with questions from totally opposing views. And that was something, it was definitely a lot of growth. There's a few people that I worked with at the Post who were later a lot more famous. A notable example is Ron Dermer, who is currently a cabinet member in the Netanyahu government, was an advisor for Netanyahu for a number of years, and for 8 years was Israeli ambassador to the United States. Another example is Tom Rose, who was a publisher, was later advisor to Mike Pence as vice president. But it was just a whole lot of different experiences merging into one. Like when I was growing up, you had print media, you had radio media, and you had television news media. And with the internet and multimedia, like all this very much gets integrated. Like you can go on a television station's news website and not even have any video or any audio and read something. You can you can go on a newspaper's website and listen to a podcast or view a video interview, and so on. So in this short period of time, so the newspaper Jerusalem Post decided to do a project that they called Jerusalem Post Radio. So it's a newspaper having a radio station, but they did it as like a separate entity. Like today, a newspaper can't really do that because it's just expected with the whole multimedia that they'd have the type of things we were doing. But it was like there was another major advantage is that it was before the age of social media. So you had newspapers and like conventional media with properly trained journalists using the internet as a medium, and which was a very, very good thing, but you didn't quite have social media taking off, undermining information at the same level. The reason I'm saying that, okay, there's a lot of arguments about standards of journalists or standards of newspapers or standards of news organizations, but there's at least a certain set of professional ethics or a certain set of standards when it comes to professional news organizations. A lot of legitimate arguments about those standards, I acknowledge that. But when it comes to social media, it's everyone saying whatever they think, and it very, very much takes off out of control with a lot of misinformation. So, in some ways, I miss that particular age. Unfortunately, the archives, like all the interviews that were recorded, have been lost in the archives. So I can't get actual content today. So what I want to do is interview the team members, anyone who's willing to interview about their experience, and let it be recorded and not be totally lost in history, and people can share their various different viewpoints.
Very interesting. Well, we should have a lot of atzlacha with that.
Amen. And there was also a few famous people I met that I hadn't heard of before. When I started working on it, someone walks into a room, introduces himself, Bill Crystal. I'm like, huh. And I find out, he was Chief of Staff to Dan Quayle,
Wow.
who was Vice President to George Herbert Walker Bush. There was something very, very funny, because journalists are so used to people like that coming into the office and interviewing people like that. So what was the excitement? Not a VIP being in a room, but there was a lot of free food because of it. That was the real excitement in the office. So I'm saying this to emphasize when you get used to that type of stuff, real excitement becomes things like free food.
That's very funny.
Yeah.
Wow, great.
So
that's it. Do you want to ask this last question?
Yes, I'll.
Already, just so you know, we're already over time, but it's your call.
Yeah. I'll ask it and let it roll.
Okay.
Just let me put this on.
And what's the time?
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask it, and then I'm going to, I think, put it down underneath. Hi, I understand that you are a rabbinic graduate of Ola Gola program at Osama and worked as a rabbi in Baltimore for 4 years. Can you describe your experience?
Wow, there's a lot to describe. You want to hear more about Orla Gola or about my experience in Baltimore, or both?
A bit of both, and like how your what your training is relevant, and also like on the job, like whatever wasn't in the training that you just learned on the job.
On the job.
Once again, I think you should switch the mic.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Black on black is much better.
And yeah, your choice. What you say?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's an interesting question. I've never really taken the time to ask myself that question. Like, what did I gain? What did I do? So, Or Lagola was a 2-year rabbinical program. In the program, they taught us practical halacha, Jewish law, and how to be a rabbi of a synagogue, of a community. And we also got training in how to do outreach, right? How to do kiruv with various members of the community, including children, adults, and running workshops, how to teach a class, etc. So in my 4 years, so it wasn't 4 years in Baltimore, I was actually in Baltimore for 3 years. I was in New York for 1 year, and then I was in Baltimore for 3. I started off by running a program in a Sunday school in New York and in Suffolk County for about 1 year, and working with kids, and then I went on to Baltimore. So in Baltimore, where I spent 3 years, I was working for Eshatar for a year, and then I spent 2 years working for NCSY. Then what was my experience? So over the 4 years, I'd say the most successful thing that I did was so when I was working in Baltimore, I started working with adults, running workshops and one-on-one with young couples and with unmarried young individuals. And at one point in the shul that we had, there was a kid who approached me, a child who approached me, and he said, I want to start a Jewish culture club in a public high school that he was attending. And I asked somebody in NCSY how to run the program, how does it go? And then I started one club in a Jewish culture club in this public high school, in Franklin High School. And the first attendance I had we had 45 kids come to the first program. And whenever I would try and run a shiur or a workshop or any sort of social event with adults, if I was lucky, I would get 15 to 20. And then when I ran my first program in a high school, so I had 45 kids. And I saw that it was just a lot more effective. Kids were more open, more responsive. And the only thing I had to do to get them to come was to give them free pizza. So I ran one club, and then I asked him if he has any friends in any other schools, and I branched out from one school to the next. And within a period of about 2.5 months, I was able to start 9 culture clubs in 9 different public high schools, and I had about 400 kids coming weekly. I had an annual budget of about $12,000 for pizza, because I would buy pizza for these kids every week. And so with Baruch Hashem, it was very successful. We had kids mostly, and I had to deal with all sorts of interesting cases while I was there. I guess like a couple of interesting stories was at one point I had a kid who was coming to the culture club, and he was really, really into it and really involved. Very exciting, and the kid seemed like a little bit of a nebuch. Like it wasn't very. First of all, he was always sad, and he always out of it. He was coming to the clubs. He was happy to be there, but he just wasn't participating. And one day he just stopped showing up. So I went to the guidance counselor and I asked, "What happened? Where's this kid? What happened to him?" And the guidance counselor said, "We've been trying to reach him. We haven't been able to get a hold of him. Here's his address. You can go to his house." So I went to his house, and he lived in like the most run-down part of Baltimore, like what we would call white trash. And I go into the house, and the kid is sitting there with his two his 2 nephews, and his 2 nephews were both black. So I said, "Why aren't you in school?" He says, "I can't go to school because my sister has a job where she works all night, And you can only imagine what she was doing when she was working all night in some sort of pub, bar, whatever it is. So I have to stay here to watch my nephews, right? And the two nephews were black because his sister had married some black guy, or had had a couple of kids with some black guy, and the black guy's in jail. So the sister is there by herself, and she's with these two kids, and he's basically says, like, I have to watch my kids while my sister is sleeping because she's up working all night. So I realized that there's like something going wrong, like, with this whole picture, and the house was total disarray. There were boxes and boxes of pizza piled up and clothes all over the place and cigarette butts. It was pretty disgusting, and I called. So I wanted to get social services involved. And through my research, I saw the Jewish family social services is not equipped to handle cases like this. They couldn't deal with it. So it's beyond the scope of what they can handle. And so I called the posek and I asked him. I said, "Is it mutter for me to call not secular social services on this Jewish kid?" And when I asked the posek this question, the posek wanted more information about what was going on. Where was this girl? Where was why was the boy not going to school? Where were these black kids, and what was going on? And when I told him that the reason why this boy had to watch the kids was because the girl was, his sister was out all night in a bar, dancing and doing whatever, he said, they're not Jewish. He said, the family's not Jewish. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, the boy told me he's Jewish. The girl, his sister, told me they're Jewish. I spoke to the mother once. The mother told me that they're Jewish. And the posek said, no, he's not Jewish, because there are three traits of a Jew: Baishanim, Gomel Chasadim, and Rachmanim. And he said that if this girl, the sister of this boy who's involved in your clubs, would so openly just tell you about what she's doing at night. Like, she told me about I don't want to say it on camera, right?
Yeah.
But, right? But if she was so open about telling me about what she was doing, then she's not a Baishan. And he said, that can't be Jewish. Like, there's just something wrong here. So he said, go back and ask the mother, are you sure you're Jewish? So I went back to the mother. And I said, are you Jewish? Are you sure? She said, yeah, I told you. My mother was from the Holocaust and from Europe. And I said, really? That's so interesting. I said, do you know anything about Judaism? Do you know the Shema Yisrael? She says, no, I don't know anything. My mother didn't want to talk about it after the war. She didn't want to have anything. I said, are you absolutely certain, 100% that you're Jewish? And she said, yeah, I'm Jewish. And I kept pushing her, and I asked her again. I said, how do you know? I said, where does it come from? You're not giving me any sort of indication. They said, I want to believe you, but I don't have anything. So then she just broke down and started crying. And she said, Rabbi, I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. I hope I don't go to hell. I didn't mean to lie to you, but I didn't know what to do. She says, I'm not Jewish. I said, the only reason I told you I was Jewish is because my son, as you can see, doesn't have anything. He doesn't have a father. His sister's all messed up, and we don't have any money, and I struggle so much, and I can't give him any attention, and you were the first good thing that happened to him in his life. So I want to, I told him to lie and tell you that he was Jewish so that you would take him in and be part of the club. So once I learned that, I was like, great, and I called social services, and I let them take over. But it shows you how important it is to go to Das Torah, as I didn't know what to do, and Das Torah just made it very simple and said, they're not Jewish, it can't be, all right?
And it's good that social services actually intervene given the case.
Absolutely. No, I after that I never followed up to see what happened, but I'm sure that whatever it was would be better than the situation.
I can only imagine. Understand you were in NCSY yourself and attended a public high school yourself. How did that help you being able to do your job as a Hebrew rabbi in Israel?
It's a good question. I guess ultimately, first and foremost is I grew up not religious, and when NCSY took me in and showed me the beauty of Torah and the beauty of Judaism, and I see how it's changed my life. I'm one of the fortunate ones that found my way to Judaism, and I have B'li Hara, 8 children, and a married daughter, and I look at my friends, and most of them are either divorced or never got married or struggling. Even if they have money, they don't have meaning in their life. And Judaism has given me so much because of NCSY, what NCSY gave me, from the simcha, from the dancing, and from the inspiration, that's what led me to get involved in Or Lagola. It made me say, I want to give this to other people. I want to take the gift that I got, and I want to give it to others as well. So that inspired me and motivated me to get involved. And also just growing up in a system that's not religious, and then having NCSY helped me relate to the kids and give them what they needed in order to bring them close. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah. I wanna share. Can you put the microphone back?
Yeah.
One last thing, and then we'll. So maybe another take.
Yeah.
Conspicuously absent was the name of the rabbi, Basic.
There was some story wrong.
I'm not sure you meant to say the name.
I'm sure he meant not to say it.
It's a well-known poster.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, where was it? You talking to the camera?
I guess for this one.
Okay. Okay, Shroot. Shoot.
I want to share my own story. You might call it hero. I'm not sure. This happened to me in the last couple of years. I happened to see a Facebook post, someone I knew. His father, who's Jewish, his father passed away, and it said that it had funeral details and that his father would be cremated. And I was thinking, what can I do? And what's my obligation? Because realistically, I don't have much chance doing anything about it, and I'm not even familiar enough with the situation. Why that's the choice. I happen to know that they're very far from being religious. So I ended up sending a message and putting an introduction, sorry to hear about the passing of your father, and also mentioning the one event that I remembered meeting his father and thanking him. I'd spoken to this person during COVID, and one way that he identified with being Jewish was his experience being on a kibbutz in his early 20s. I thanked him for sharing that, and I spoke to a number of rabbis, and in the end, rabbinical involvement wasn't going to happen. So I incorporated into the message and the Jewish funeral option, the Orthodox option for a funeral, if you choose to do so. Baruch Hashem, I wasn't successful, but I wasn't offensive at the same time. I got a message back explaining that it was his father's wish to be cremated, that his father was claustrophobic, and that's why his father had the wish. His being claustrophobic, didn't want to be buried underground. So while I wasn't successful, I learnt the personal aspect of what was behind it instead of just blanket putting people into categories. So I thanked him for explaining his father's side of the story, and Baruch Hashem, it didn't cause a personal issue. I've spoken to this person a number of times since. So it can be very, very tricky to actually address an issue. In most instances, you just avoid it full stop. And in most instances, if you try and address it, you very easily cause major problems very quickly. So I managed to bring up the issue and realize it's not something that can be addressed, but with actually attempting to address it. Finished.